Cool. Welcome to Talking Thursdays. I'm very excited to be joined today by a very good friend, Thomas Pokorn, also known as Popcorn, also known as Tommy P. This is episode 56. For those who don't know Thomas is a native Austrian, but living in New York. Not only is he a super talented copywriter and all-round funny man, he's also a creative director, having worked with a number of exceptional studios across New York and beyond. So I'm going to hand over to Thomas as opposed to Tommy, unless you want to be known as Tommy throughout this conversation. And I will see you in about 45 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. I mean, Tommy usually doesn't come up. I'm not mad at it, but I just don't respond to it. It's kind of like when you hear a sound that you know it's not meant for me. I'm also happy to be excluded from any Toms usually, which no shade to Toms, but that's not me somehow. It's never been.
Popcorn, then. We'll go for Popcorn.
Let's go for Popcorn.
Cool.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I have a bunch of slides prepared. Up until the last second, kept shuffling around, checking for any spelling mistakes, which of course I got 2 times Elliott wrong. So if you catch any, I didn't put them there, even though I made this talk and it's about me. All right. Do I just launch or do you edit this part out?
Just run with it.
Okay, I'm gonna go straight for the gun. Hi and servus. Thank you so much for having me. This is the Austrian word to kind of like say hello and greet people, which I really like because it comes from serving people, which we're also gonna return to in a second. For me, it's really interesting being on this, which I looked at a bunch of episodes and it's mostly designers. And I feel like I've got a bit of a different background than what you might have seen on these. I did not study what I currently do. I did not go into graphic design, nor am I a graphic designer. I didn't go to a well-known or creative university. I didn't live in New York or the US until the day I moved here. I did not have a great mentor who took a chance on me. I did not work at a great studio, a big company permanently that everybody knows where I kind of made my break. I'm just Thomas Pokorn, and I'm here to tell you kind of like why it is that James would think that I'm interesting, and hopefully some clients in the future will continue to do so. A quick overview about me for those who don't know me, which is going to be pretty much everyone. I'm a freelance strategy and copy director. Also sometimes referred to as a creative director if the contract says so and dictates so. I'm originally from Austria, which if you people don't know what Austria is, it's not Australian, it's a different weird accent. I prepared this helpful sheet with Austrians that you may know. And we've got Mozart, we've got Chile, we've got Schrödinger from the famous Cat, Sigmund Freud, Niki Lauda, bunch of great icons with a lovely accent. Absolutely, of course, no one else of consequence in the 20th century is Austrian and irrelevant. Nothing to see here. Let's not think about that at all. So to give you any sense of where I am, I'm originally from Austria, small place. I'm not from Vienna, which is kind of like the one place that people know. I'm not from the mountains. I'm from the second largest city, which is not actually called that. It's called Graz. And here's a little picture, a little slide of the town. We were a cultural UNESCO capital in 2003, and it's got a lot of lovely architecture here, for example, like the island built by Peter Cook. So give you a sense of where it is. We've got, I think, 9 neighboring countries, but my math is bad at this point. It's a lovely city, but I had to move eventually because I kind of got bored of it a little bit. Sorry to say Austria, because it's so beautiful and so peaceful that if you want to change things, even about yourself, that it can sometimes be hard and a little bit stifling. So what I do is I help brands figure out things. I help them figure out who they are, why they matter. I help them figure out where they're maybe headed next and what they should say and do about it. I always like to say I put thoughts into words and words to thoughts. Air horns here. Basically, I like to think I make things make sense, and design with words is how I also sometimes put it, because a lot of the work I do revolves around branding, sometimes the advertising thoughts. That's where the creative part comes in. And yeah, I do this for brands that are just starting out, that have been around long enough to kind of forgot why they exist, what you do in the rebranding sector. and everything in between, really. And yeah, designers get the luxury of always having something visual, things that you can look at that you want. So they get the fun, the glory, and the speaking invites to these things. So genuinely, thank you for having me. Finally, somebody lets a non-designer talk again. I've worked with a lot of big names that I also put together here. The thinking that I do has ended up working for companies like Google, Nike, Hinge, and also work for a bunch of studios and in-house placements. It's like Center, Porto Rosa, Base, RGA currently. Instrument, did a long stint with Coda earlier this year. So I've come up to like a bunch of names that people might know now. But I also want to be honest, because this is not like an outright brag. Almost all of the big US names that you see here have also happened to me, or I've worked with them over the last 3 years. Before that, it also looked very different, which I'm going to get into. So yeah, the shortest way to describe what I do, I design with words. Here's what my Slack channel looks like, where I'm still kicked out of some, but I'm still like across a couple like agency Slack threads where they like to keep me around here. But yeah, want to offer like my slightly surprising, maybe different perspective of how I wormed my way into the good graces of many a talented branding and creative studio, because my work really stretches across brand strategy, creative strategy, naming, tone of voice, messaging campaigns across like various industries and sectors. But it's kind of hard to put that into words as a through line. I put this in here because I was trying to think about the things that I do and how to best put them. And I realized like I've never done a talk about just me before. So it was very hard to kind of like find the coherent narrative that you endorse and make this all seem like it was always meant to be this way, which a lot of talks do. Because for me, like it wasn't like a straight line, a journey. It very much felt like bouncing around. And this talk also gave me the opportunity to kind of like find the roots for myself of what led me here, and sometimes wonder myself of what am I doing. So how I got here, it's not just Google Meet. Again, originally grew up in Austria, which is part of this globe. The animation is not playing here. I grew up the youngest of three. I have a brother and a sister, both a bit older. My parents already covered a boy, a girl, so I got to be the child who no one cares about, not anyone's problem, and figure out stuff on my own. Yeah, spend a lot of time alone, just observing, reading, drawing comic books, running around in the woods. For some reason, I love building dams. My mother hated it because I always came home dirty. I did not think of myself as like a very creative kid. I didn't know there was a career like this. I just figured I was going to be a marine biologist until one day in school I learned that Austria has no ocean, so I can't go out and study sharks. It's landlocked. So thus my eventual career and path to greatness was blocked. My dad was a teacher, my mom a bank clerk. Mom left her work of money at work, dad didn't. So I grew up surrounded by books, films, music, and they were very liberal in like letting us pick up whatever we were interested in. The first logo I ever loved was the Batman symbol. I was drawn to not just a comic book being around or like the movies we're allowed to watch on TV, but I think it did something to me in like the aspect of branding. I also put up like that frame of when Bruce Wayne in the first Batman comic actually realizes that he wants to become a symbol. And that kind of really did something for me. And the first time I unconsciously kind of like learned about brands, or looking back where I understand now what are brands, when I grew up, again, 3 kids, teacher and bank clerk, we didn't have a ton of money. We did not need for anything. So this is not like a Dickensian poorhouse story, but we did shop at the discount store. And I remember always going to help my mom because I was incredibly fast at bagging, and I took great pride in that. I'd stand there at like the shelves looking at things, and I always had this question, like, why is shopping at the discount store and getting one product less than, or like looked at as worse than getting the other product, when it's often made by the same company, when it's often the same thing? Did not have a word for it at the time, or like a brain capacity to fully understand. My frontal lobes weren't developed, but that's the whole branding game. I realized it's kind of like, oh, I forgot to skip to the slide. Sorry, I'm just moving along. And I realized like along the way, that's kind of like branding. That's something I was chewing on, is like this promise that a product makes, or something makes, an idea makes you. And I think I'm still asking that same question. I just get to answer it now, and I get to work on bigger, shinier, and sometimes the more expensive box now. But I still have a great respect for anything that doesn't dumb anything down. That's something I also try to do, where it's something that's for everyone or like a cheaper product. I still have this in me that I never wanted to be like bad or worse off and still give it the care. So the question was kind of like at the start, shaped by like the idea of like early love for symbols, despite not really understanding it. But my education or like my background and inspiration kind of happened along the way. It wasn't just Batman when I was obsessed with all the cartoons. It also happened for film. I was big on that came out when I was super little. The Val Kilmer Batman influenced me greatly, and because I loved the actor Val Kilmer for whatever reason, my mom let me watch all his movies when they were on TV, even though a lot of them are quite violent. So I got a love for movies there, and I never was good at sports, full stop. Not quite creative, not a good sports kid, but like the most I ever managed in boyhood fandom was Zinedine Zidane from his Juventus years through France winning the World Cup, which really sealed it. One of my idols, I was always watching that closely, and I liked the way he was like laying out plays in a way no one else did and working out things that no one else could on the pitch. And I think that's something that also like always drew me to him. Also, fun fact that I'm keep bringing up whenever somebody brings up Zinedine Zidane, I have an autograph. I got it from his Juventus years, and the photo is of the Brazil-France '98 final. And it was sent to me like a year after the final happened, and my mom was so confused why a little kid would get a letter from France addressed to him. And I treasured it, and now I'm framed. My first real aesthetic touchstone was skateboarding. I got into Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and I want to say real quick, I'm not a poser. I was never good, not even a little. It didn't stop me from trying to do tricks and filming me and friends landing absolutely nothing, basically. But over time, what drew me in wasn't the skating itself or me being good at it. It was really like the logo, the graphics, the whole look. I really just wanted the stickers, and to me, skating really became also like a doorway to everything else, where I got a taste for the logos that drew me in and like these little brand worlds. And I also found a lot of like music that I still like and love and listen to through skate videos. That's like the whole, it sounds shameful to just say aesthetics, but it really drew me in. That's how I started looking up like what the artists were in the videos and all, like looking at certain parts to get to the song again, because everything was working so nicely. And that's how I got to listen to Gang of Four for the first time, or like really clicked with Black Flag and figured out which Black Sabbath songs were the ones that I would tell older kids were the cool ones that I like. So the soundtracks were really an education. And also I have it up here. My favorite skate video, probably Girls, Yeah Right. Also love Zero's Dying to Live. Flip Sorry or Lakai's Fully Flared is an all-timer. Incomparable to this day. I also bought Trasher magazine to get to the ads like you see to the right. But yeah, what I really loved most at the time were the stickers, and looking at the ads, because I honestly couldn't afford even a 30 € t-shirt at the time. That was way beyond my price range. But yeah, those were the first brands that I started really loving and wanting to identify with, long before I actually knew that that was a brand. I kind of like started feeling how it feels to like a brand, or how it feels to want to belong to something. And yeah, that's, I think, like in a way the supermarket thing answered by a teenager because he couldn't ride a skateboard, just like turning things around and being more into the brands themselves versus the actual sport. From there, it also continued with the musical education. I started more and more listening to a hardcore punk through it. I was really drawn to kind of like DIY aesthetic and mindset, building something from the ground up, the determination, principles. Also dressed head to toe in black, not because it was the fashion or cool, but because I also figured out at around 15, 16 that I had no idea how colors worked on me or which colors worked. So I just decided to forego all of them. Black spoke to me, it stuck, and I'm keeping it simple. Through skate videos, I also got into hip hop a bunch, and it was like a lot of the old school leaning stuff that's cool, but I was also want to say I'm not ashamed to admit now that I was listening to a lot of the early 2000s R&B that was just on TV. So right next to the new metal and the corn of the time, I would love seeing the Missy Elliott videos come up, or the Aaliyah video, because they were just a huge part in like this beautiful other different aesthetic. I was drawn to like the looks of it before I even knew the name Hype Williams itself. But all of it was kind of sick to me. Of course, I kept it a secret because you don't want to be the soft person when you're already like a short, chubby Austrian little boy that you love listening to R&B. Kept that a secret to avoid getting roasted. I'm glad I still kept listening to it and never let it go. So yeah, I realized also putting this talk together and looking at old stuff that I started making things earlier than I realized. In America, a lot of people use GeoCities, so that was kind of like their first contact to the web. I used Homestead, which was this cheap website builder, to make what is now would be considered kind of like memes and meme pages. And I just got my first start of just figuring out how I could build websites for dumb things. And eventually, like, a friend of my brother's asked me why I wasn't using Microsoft's front page, their website creation suite, which essentially worked like putting together a Word doc. And then I got a cracked version and just started going ham and building these stupid ass websites. I also got like a hand-me-down super cheap pen digital camera, and started just taking pictures of a school life and class and uploading them to my little website. And when I then like went some time without updates, eventually like people started asking me like why I wasn't posting anymore and uploading things. So not that I'm like that much of a trendsetter, but interesting to me, like predating blogs and Instagram, and being inspired by like older kids and my brother's friends, that I started like just dumb weird posting. I also made like a website about the soccer coach of my brother's friend, because there was just one video, kind of like the sad Harold meme, that I found endlessly amusing and cracked me up. So I built this tribute page of what I thought this guy's life was. And I also there was this online RPG builder. I was big in the Final Fantasy games because they had like elaborate, long, complicated stories. And so I would spend some time trying to build my own RPGs online, and just these role-playing games. Again, an early exercise, I guess, in world building. But yeah, I had no idea that creator was a career people could have. But I'm kind of glad that I'm not just doing recipe posts for a living all the time. No shade to the actual recipe posters. Another touchstone that also really was important to me. I spent a lot of time being online and reading about music, and I have the SoulSeek icon there for all those familiar. I was heavy on the Interpol message board, because there was a lovely community there at the time, despite me being essentially a child talking to all these adults that were sharing tips about like up and coming bands or concerts they were going to see, and then downloaded a lot of those legally, of course, through SoulSeek, and I would get like hard drives worth of music, and a lot of like people's music that they were making themselves. Also, for those who don't know, on the left, Specs was like a music magazine. There was like hyper intellectual and borderline academic in coming out of Germany. And I would also always read that and try to understand what they were even trying to say or like writing about. But it was a huge influence in me, because I loved reading like their analysis, their critique, and their interviewing especially. That also like set me on a path for liking interviews and enjoying talking to people. But yeah, and movies was a big thing in my childhood. I was hooked from very young. My dad would pass out on the couch, and then would be something on TV that I was definitely not allowed to watch, but stuck with me because I was young and impressionable. So late at night, I would stay up and I would see at, I think, like 11, The Thing for the first time, and just being mind blown. It's a beautiful John Carpenter movie. Visually stunning, hold up to this day. And those were kind of my favorites. And I realize now I still like a lot of horror. What I really like about it is like building this visual world and like this story that has its own logic, and then having like an aesthetic to them that really feels like a transmission beamed in from another plane of existence. And also that they often drop you just like into a new world that makes sense with its own rules and doesn't have to over explain everything if it's well done. And I really like this restraint. Also thinking back to my career now, I think that's why I like trying to trust the audience, not over explaining them and not dumbing things down, but just making it like as entertaining as possible to drop people in. And yeah, that's what I think about good work kind of like to this day. But yeah, I was at that point kind of like getting into my teenage years too. I went deep from an early love for what was then at the time or often considered schlocky. I went pretentious teenager deep. I was reading Camus books. I got into Criterion. Early on, I had people send me, paid a lot of money to send me DVDs or bring them back from the States for films that I hadn't even seen just because I read that they were supposed to be good. And yeah, I was on my budding way to become an annoying culture critic. Loved staring at what I thought was beautiful art, trying to understand it, reading interviews, again, like in the music magazine that I talk about, even though I couldn't make any of these things myself. I just basically lived on discovering music and interesting films and art. And yeah, that's kind of still my thing. Like, I still love movies to this day. I love catching like anniversary screenings or old prints. Make a habit out of trying to go to the theater. Also love going alone to theaters just to really drink something in and take in a movie whenever given the chance. And going to concerts too. So those things are like a big through line. So what I realized, like, or why I wanted to go like the long way around. I'm telling you all of this because I think like at the heart of any creative practice is often like a sense of taste that you might not even be aware of yourself. But mine really wasn't built on anything like necessarily cool or an ad school or something that made sense. It was kind of built on being thrown around at hardcore shows, trying to get skate stickers, R&B music, and wanting to see a video game that I kept secret from friends, and films that kind of refused to explain themselves to my feeble mind, and just generally getting an excitement for pop culture. It's sometimes to me kind of weird that I didn't end up being a designer, but I did not know truthfully that it was even an option. I just liked stuff and I wasn't really artsy. I was just too weird for any actually cool kids, and I was too normy for weird kids. And yeah, so before I actually got paid and started an actual career of any gain, I had a lot of like a bunch of different jobs, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. When it came time to choose any studies, I originally generally thought I was going to be a doctor. Truth is, I did not know what I wanted. I was interested in pretty much everything, which is why I was so stressed as a teenager. I was chasing good grades, truthfully, in every subject at once. I got straight A's in every subject because I'm a huge nerd. And then figured I'd do my civil service at the Red Cross. And while doing that, I also played an unhealthy amount of Trauma Center, Second Opinion on the Nintendo Wii, trying to get my scalpel movement and my timing right. And I also liked it because if you look closer, I thought the surgeon kind of looked like me at the time. So yeah, I was really drawn to this idea of diagnosing problems, picking the right instrument, finding solutions, and fixing something precisely, which is, in a funny way, kind of the job I do now, just swapping a scalpel for words. But I wouldn't be here if I was actually a great surgeon. We would not probably know each other. I did get into medical school, or like would have gotten, I did the tests, but on a whim, I also looked at journalism. What also drew me to there's a video that's not playing. That's too sad. It's me in a hospital. But here we get to that. I had a big ass knee surgery because from my feeble attempts at skateboarding, I had a busted knee that just exploded basically, and I was laid up in the hospital. And that's what kind of like put me on this path to maybe like wanting to become a doctor, because I was really drawn to like the physical therapy and figuring out like what ails people. So yeah, I went to like there's these big tests you have to do to try to become a doctor in med school and to even get in. But I also figured like maybe I'll look at the journalism. Teachers had always told me writing was too interesting, and they had a knack for like putting together these arguments and arguing about things that didn't need arguing, or like putting together stories and essays. So I figured like maybe I'll try journalism, and ended up getting accepted. And then I figured like it's just 4 years, maybe I'll do that and I can still go into med school maybe later, which I also didn't, because then I did my master's in journalism. And yeah, went into that, worked out to varying degrees. I did a bunch of like writing and classical journalism school. I found this quote, which I thought was hilarious, that I took from an actual interview with like the former economy secretary of the economy in Austria, where I was able to get this beautiful quote from him. That's how serious I was. So teachers would, even in journalism school, usually tell me I'm too creative, too emotional, or like too fun and weird for proper reporting. And in journalism, that's kind of like a fatal flaw if you get too like colorful and funny with things. But it turns out it's kind of like the point in advertising. And we had an advertising elective that I really took to, and then I thought maybe that's the path I should try out, and it kind of really clicked. I had no idea that copywriting existed properly either. Kind of like an intellectual country bumpkin with no way of understanding that there were actual career paths to do these things in faster. But not mad at it, because what journalism gave me, I still use some things. Never want to make up something that isn't there. I got research rigor from journalism school. I still go back to source, love doing interviews and figuring out things straight from the horse's mouth. And also learned that the creative part is only ever as good as the thinking that supports it. And yeah, that's really what I love about branding. Still grew straight out of that. It lets me talk to all kinds of people, learn different things, and I get a front row seat to businesses or people that I'd never otherwise see. One day it could be energy drinks, next day it could be surgical robots, and that's something that I find very interesting in being thrown around. But yeah, I had no idea that copywriting existed, so no way of knowing. And I graduated, and I figured the only thing that I could do was trying to go down further this path. So I hitched up with a big German advertising agency, worked on car companies, cameras, energy brands, but really like electricity utilities, turning out concepts, being asked, being like a young person in the room of what should we do here? What do you think? What is the idea? Despite thinking that I was going to learn from them. They offered me a contract, but I first went back to Austria to finish my master's thesis, which I'm very proud of, because I wrote a paper about memes, one of the first academic papers. That left my professors at the time profoundly confused about what they were being asked to read. But I did manage to graduate with honors. Shout out to no one else but me. I called it on the memes really early on. And then the plan was to go kind of back to Germany. I had that job offer waiting, but instead I kind of like fell for the Austrian design scene at the time and the creativity scene. But I did notice something when I was trying to get a job or looking at the website. None of them had a copywriter on staff at the time, and the word even barely existed in German. So if you had anyone on your staff, even it would be called a texter, which just sounds like they're text messaging all day. So I had two options in my mind: move away and try to get a job as a copywriter, which I still didn't properly know the word existed, or maybe I'll try to work for all of them. So in a very dumb move, I started writing cold emails and trying to get a job or like maybe freelance for these people. And a professor connected me to a creative collective. It wasn't really a company. It sometimes acted as like, or was seen as an agency because they were doing good work. And one of the guys needed like a young person to stay with the client after he sold in his workshop on the terrifying world of social media. And I remember like asking when I would be paid, and they were like, "Oh, you have to ask the client, like you're working for them technically." So that was a harsh first freelance lesson in learned the hard way, making sure the money is right before you say yes to something, and kind of understanding the payment structure. But through them, I did end up landing the retainer. That's a picture for me. We did this. I should probably explain this weird Ralph Lauren photo shoot. We thought it would be funny if you're not like an actual agency to have this very glamorous, very expensive looking photo shoot and dressed up for the day. That's me looking like the bully and black sheep of the family. Who's a real tough guy. But yeah, that's how I ended up actually landing a retainer doing social media for the young first accounts, first bank card for one of the largest banks in Central and Eastern Europe. And I just thought I'd try freelancing for like half a year, see if I take to it, if it's cool, and see where it goes. I had no responsibilities, no debt, no girlfriend or anything at the time. So it's just like, I can still like get a job after half a year. But Spoilers, I did end up sticking to it because recommendation by recommendation, things kind of grew. I threw this in here. While I was starting to pick up my freelance business, I was still also working as a waiter and a barkeeper, and eventually the owner of the place asked me if I wanted to take care of the social media accounts, because I was also like young, and if I didn't do something like that would lend itself to that, and if I maybe wanted to take care of it, because I knew how this Facebook thing worked. So I was just like dropping posts, and essentially this is very much a dive bar where nothing was special or going on or happening around its time. So I took great fun in essentially making fun of the bar itself, and people really took to it. I even eventually got as one of the things you need to see and experience in my hometown. Got a write-up in Vice magazine as the funniest person in town, when people didn't even know that it was me behind all these things. It was an early lesson in just kind of going wild, trusting your gut, and doing some dumb shit and turning it into advertising. So recommendation by recommendation, while I was actually trying to pull together a freelance career, things started growing. One of the things that I'm proud of, like my first big brand that I worked on, was like an Austrian coffee roaster that started in 1912. And my copy is still in some parts of the website and part of the brand. And I remember sitting in the client meeting, not to put shade on them, because I think the founder isn't even working for them anymore. He sold it. But I remember sitting there, and like my quote for the whole copy was 2,000 euros. And I was asked, isn't that a lot for copywriting? And I said, like, do you tell people that your coffee is too expensive? And the guy said, yeah, why? And I said, do you tell people it's worth it as a counter offer? And he said, yeah, why? And I said, like, it's the same thing, like same answer. You just pay for the quality and to get something better. We ended up working together on a bunch of projects, but funny enough that also like the rates quite low. So yeah, I made my journey. Along the way, while already working as a freelancer, I realized I didn't really have an ad school and training. So I bought as a training, I bought the classic ad annuals, collected, and just tried to retro engineer a lot of the ads and figure out why they work or who they were supposed to work for. And was through that I also started kind of teaching myself strategy and figuring out that. And because I always had annoying questions when it came to copywriting and wanted more of a briefing, questions like these, I eventually a partner at an international agency that I was working for even said, you're really mostly a strategist, because you're not just doing copy, you're just doing the most, as it were. And I didn't know that was a job either. But the second I heard that word, I started kind of reorganizing things around that. So I decided to lean into the part of becoming a strategist, because it was no longer about just delivering great lines, but really trying to understand things of what we were supposed to do. And from there, we went wider, or I went wider. The real unlock for me in working life was kind of language, because tone of voice kind of barely bends in the German language, if you can believe it. So I stopped translating ideas a lot of the time and started thinking more and more in English to get to more fun and interesting lines and interesting ideas, and closer to the stuff that I've kind of lived for and loved my whole life. And some time into it, clients and agencies that I was working with caught up, and I got a lot more English work. I got just they figured that I was the man for the job and could land that. So I wanted to kick a couple early brands that I'm still proud of. One of my first namings, where we built this Austrian gin, and then to make it more international, the copy wasn't supposed to be German, but I really made sure that it already has some beautiful banging lines to make it across borders in the English language. Work on this bakery chain in town that I was also really proud of. Love still rebranding, taking something that's kind of that's of a place and really special and distinct, and keeping what's good about it and carrying that forth. Really fun journey, being respectful of something older and traditional too. Also, Bill worked on the branding for this small change of boutique hair salons, which are a lot of fun, putting together a strong identity here on, from the naming to working even down to production, on the photo shoot, getting stuff there in time, getting construction materials for models to stand from. And like as the years go by, I'm still really proud of these projects. And I created a lot of this alongside Christina, my former creative and also romantic partner, if I can say that on the call, also former guest of Talking Thursdays. And she's also the reason that I ended up writing poetry for a fashion brand, for example, when she brought me onto this. We did a lot of projects together. Another point that I'm really proud of, a couple of years after graduating, I was tasked like as part of a larger team working on the design and reconceptualization and also creative direction for the university that I studied at. And I put that out here because that's like the original class that or like the original course that I visited. And then I got to work on like the redesign and restructuring of their entire offering, which was also really proud. Another move, I'm gonna play this here with sound, but just to give you a little taste. I also got to create advertising for my own hometown and Austrian tourism, where I did this series of videos inviting like the neighboring countries of Austria to visit town, and always spoke in a specific distinctly videos. This is, for example, the Italian one, where it draws all these parallels to Italy and makes jokes about the town and Austrians, and shows them in a way we're not so different, you and I. And man, for example, the kicker in this is that they should visit Austria because there's no Austrians there anyway in summer because they're all vacationing in Italy. So I always lived for like including these little Easter eggs and nuggets and thinking kind of like around the corner. But yeah. So I was working on like I didn't treat freelancing as just freelancing. I kind of looked at it always as having like my own studio, and that's how I approached a lot of these projects. Where I also wanted to make sure that every project you work on can maybe become the portfolio project and a really important one. This is my old office that I gave up just before moving to America, and that brings me like closer to the next section of this talk, because like I spoke English really well. I got to work maybe across European borders, did some work for like London companies, or got to go to Paris, to Berlin, and like bounce around a little. But people like, I think in other countries maybe don't understand that like sometimes like budgets can get quite low. So for every project that I worked on, you had to do like a whole song and dance in Austria to justify like basic pricing and thinking. But I kept thinking, I believe at this point I'm really good at this, and I wanted to play Champions League, which for the Americans in the crowd, it's roughly the Super Bowl of the actual football in Europe. And I wanted to prove to myself and frankly the world how good I was, or how I thought I was. And I liked some of my work already made it online and got known, which is hard enough to pull off, despite being like in a small town in Austria. Because they always say, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I think the inverse is true. If you can make it in Bamberg, Austria, and have some of your work known, you can make it anywhere, truly. But the recognition was in the work that I did was also almost always for design. So a lot of the thoughts and words wouldn't translate, and branding and advertising at the level that I wanted to play it are built in English. And I really thought I had this in me and needed to make a change. I felt like Bruce Springsteen in Dancing in the Dark, felt restless, tapping my foot and really needing to get out. Little did I know that when I started working on the visa after a visit to New York, I originally pushed Christina at the time to go to New York because she already started working for a bunch of American companies and was making great strides. So I was like, I think we would both regret this if we just stayed here, but most of all you, because my path will look a little different because no one's clamoring for a non-native English-speaking copywriter strategist that has no track record, no references or anything to come in. So despite my inner Bruce Springsteen, took a little while to get there. So I started the visa process end of 2019. And once we started that in early 2022, the law office immediately came calling to say things were slowing down at the visa offices. This little thing, if you've heard of it, called COVID was going around. So we were told to wait for several years and just prepared as much as we could at the time before getting a go-ahead. I spent some time making playlists about songs that had any connection to the quarantine. Got really big into Animal Crossing. and got into building, which is why these images are there of my parents in face filters. I got really into starting to build Instagram face filters, and I got really good at it. And they got like into the 500,000 downloads for the one you see from the skull, which is based on the John Carpenter movie They Live. So another one of my references coming from. The other was built around the Baldessari scans, taking like an art style and reference that I love and applying it to an Instagram face filter. Basically, I just got bored and passed the time in COVID a bunch, um, while all the while already wanting to go to the US and moving there. So eventually, like, things started moving, and I cannot stress this enough. If you're ever trying to file a visa or trying to think of it, it's an absurd amount of work, because every piece of press, every award you've ever gotten, anything anybody's ever said about you in any capacity will become useful. And so you have to put together all these recommendation letters, all your projects, all your work, your portfolio really printed out, and a US citizen to vouch for you, job offers from afar, anything to prove that you won't be a burden to a social security system that exists in name only. But eventually, like end of 2022, I got to file things. And yeah, basically every free minute you have just goes into piling into building a visa. And then approval only came in May 2023. I then moved in May 2023 was when I came to New York City. Yeah. There was 3 days after I got my passport back with the visa, which I also remember because it was my mom's birthday and she was very sad that I was actually leaving after getting locked down with all this COVID time. We also learned along the way that, yes, this is me. Long hair does not work on me. And I only cut it in July of the same year because New York summers got too hot. So this is like how my glamorous journey to America went, or like how the visa stage of it went. Gonna skip ahead to the other parts of kind of like what happened when I got here, because it was quite a rude awakening in that sense. So once the dust settled, I realized that, my God, what have I done? Because I had no work network to speak of. I didn't have a home there. I didn't have any family around me. I didn't have a partner because we broke. My former creative and romantic partner ended up breaking up. I had no job offers. I didn't know how to get a social security number at first. Didn't have insurance. I didn't bring my beloved bicycle. Didn't really have a fallback or anything, and barely any connection to my name. So what I did, I spent the first months kind of visiting a few studios I'd worked with remotely, then finished the last of my European projects. And once that runway was gone, just started applying and interviewing but I quickly learned that a lot of agencies or studios were still reeling post-COVID and were telling me that they were under the worst year in recent memory. But I will also say that everything that kind of like scared me in life, like moving, visa, the job, the one thing I keep knowing how to do is just kind of like to keep working. So I had this list of every studio and every person in New York whose work I admired, and wrote each a personal email, not a template, but like a really specific note of what I like about their work and what I think I could bring to the table. And you have to understand that to a humble European, it's really hard to beat your own drum. So this was excruciating. And then I sent them out individually, and I was certain I would get silence. And like after perfecting sending each one every individually and bracing for the worst, I sent out one and immediately got a reply back the one time I sent it. Shout out Kodo, Alex from Kodo, New York, who got back to me, who I only worked with late last year for the first time. But it was really buoyant to get like some recognition, or like starting to get a track, because a lot of people didn't reply at first, but enough coffee things, like coffee hangouts happened, that things started moving. I eventually got like a multi-month run of work at Porto Rocha, where I then quickly also like started doing what I always do. I tried to just pay attention, be useful, and try to do more than is required of me at any given moment, and over deliver on things that I find exciting. I sadly was not cool enough to land a job there, of course. Few are. Shout out, he made it. But there's also something I want to point out. I always had a difficult time like coming to New York, because I felt like I was sitting between chairs. I kept getting this question, like how much of a percentage I would be of a copywriter versus a strategist, or vice versa. So I was too much of a writer for some strategists and too much of a strategist for some writers, and kind of overall felt more like an idea or like concept person who also can put the work that didn't really slot into either lane creatively fully. And yeah, people didn't quite know where to put me, maybe, and maybe that's why nobody took me a wing. Nobody ever really mentored me fully. But yeah, I got a ton of reading tips out of approaching people or like trying to find a mentor or like somebody who would take me under their Batman wing and shepherd me along. But I got enough pointers to like keep going reading, and people that showed me the way. I also have to stress at the time, I didn't even have a real portfolio online. Like I should add that I was firing out PDFs for these connections left and right. Also trying to apply for full-time jobs, soldiering on while nobody really wanted me. LOL, but that's the truth. That's a book that was recommended to me a time that I also wanted to flag because that was really inspiring through the language class, because it also helps understand how linguistics work and shape different cultures. Because I often get the question of like what people should read about a job, and I think that's like the one that really ties together how language and any form of writing shapes our brain and why it's so important for us. So yeah, when I was trying to get these jobs all the time, one of the studios on the original list was also called Center. I wrote them like in that first week where I got here. Then over a year went by, which I have proof of. Then I got an email because a mutual friend of someone at the studio recommended me for a project in the food space. I had a call with Alex Center. He liked what I was saying, the cut of my jib, and booked me to lead strategy on a project that would be, and copywriting too, for Molly Bars. And that would be the AOMAO, which was kind of like my first big break, and also big takeaway. You kind of like don't control you don't control when the work lands or when somebody gets back to you. Can kind of like only control in your own work whether you're worth recommending as a person for when it does. But yeah, that still sticks out to me because that was really a turning point, because somebody had seen some of my work, connected me to, and then I really thought like, oh shit, like with the freelancing at first, I thought I'll just thug it out in New York and try doing this for a year. And now it's been 3. It keeps going, which I'm genuinely excited about. I still feel like I'm new here, like I'm catching up. There's no prestigious university for me to fall back on. I don't have like an extended network, which I'm still like building up. I don't have the career track, but yeah, I had to rebuild all of these like work connections and essentially my entire career as a fully functioning adult, while also learning the intricacies of the American healthcare system and the tax system, which are their own full-time stressors. But yeah, I'm proud of what I've come to like build. And somewhere along the way, places started saying like that I wasn't just a copywriter or strategist also, but like even acknowledged that I was doing creative direction, and then the contract started saying so too. And I'm very lucky to be getting that nod too now. I still balk sometimes at the title of like creative director, because I've worked with a lot of people who are neither very creative nor giving direction. No shade on anyone specifically. But what I also learned about working myself is that I just like being very hands-on, keep on doing things. Because what always motivates me is where if like I saw this meme or like art thing a while back, and it's still stuck with me, because like what I'm always trying to figure out is why should this thing exist and what can I do to make it better, to give it some form of purpose, so it's not just something that bothers someone in their day-to-day. So that's generally something I think of, and that really gives me a hard time myself, where I was like, is this better than nothing? But that would do the job. And we spoke a lot about like going in process. What my day actually looks like nowadays is pretty much this. It's really just like trying to figure things out, hating life, regretting every decision that led me to this point, bouncing ideas around, throwing things at the wall, until eventually you hit something that actually makes sense and that you're happy with, and then being really excited about this and going further down. I also am a big fan, I call it procrastinating working. a lot of people like do their chores or get distracted from the work. I switch between projects. So sometimes I might be full-time with an agency where I'm working on even then a couple things. But I also love, like, if I have several things going at a time, just like switching gears. If I'm stuck on one thing, I'm just head on to another. But really, I just bang my head against the desk and try to figure out why it works. And a lot of it's just asking questions. Like, I do a lot of interviews, talking to people, and then putting it together like as a narrative for them. Yeah, wanted to put together some lately. There's another beautiful project I did with Center that was recently released. We rebranded and relaunched the originally direct-to-consumer dental oral health dental care toothbrush brand Quip, which was one of the original DTC brands when those were just starting out. So it was very fun, like trying to put my own mark on that and leading strategy there and copywriting too, and thinking what we could do here. This was a really fun one. Also, one of my first projects after I crossed over to New York. Like after eventually getting to the AMA, I was working on this project for the Hyundai, which is this big like the Harrods for those in the UK right now, the Harrods of Korea, basically. This long-standing traditional department store that had a lot of like beautiful modern architecture and was trying to figure out like a modern path to e-commerce, where I got to fly to Korea with base design and figure out the name, work on the strategy, and like overall like the positioning and like how to bring this to market. First time I've been to Asia, really exciting project. Really was fun to work on a name for something so big, and I now have a trademark for something that I named in Korea, which is sick. Also got to do some work last year for Nike, which has always been the dream. Even getting to touch like some of that and having like a billboard or a posting of that, and trying to get work within the Nike tone of voice was really stunning. So really excited about that one. And just goes to show that kind of like if you just do it and you keep on keeping on, then you might eventually get the nod and also try to do good work. And it also just happened from being plugged. I think it came through LinkedIn at random, where somebody must have connected me to some previous work or gotten a recommendation. And from the Nike gig later on, I also started working quite frequently. Allegedly, might be going back in September too. Working for Hoka on creative direction projects, figuring out the narrative for shoots and for specific new models that we're introducing to the market. Just released the Speedgoat 2 with Smino, and yeah, it's just a fun, like it's fun getting a new playing field where you get to work like on art direction geared project and have kind of figuring out like the conceptual side alongside that when the visual world is already established. Also did some work last year for Hinge, for those that have been on it, putting together like the guide to being awkward together, which was done in collaboration with Perfectly Imperfect, the website too, which was then also turned into like an out-of-home campaign to really highlight the ideas of how can we combat the isolation of Gen Z and also the male loneliness epidemic, and get people to do something together and get over that first hump of wanting to meet somebody in real life that you don't know across like mutual interests and shared awkwardness. It was a very fun narrative to put together and campaign to launch into the world. Also did some work with my Austrian buddy Paul Leichtfried for a Texas vineyard by former Indian immigrants that arrived with me through an Austrian friend, and then I was sitting in New York working on this, and it was really fun, like figuring out something strategically and in the tone of voice, figuring out how to get people to be curious and interested in the wine from Texas, and also releasing my inner Texan, because when you look at me, you just know that guy's from Texas and has a couple lines to spit in the right drawl. And so yeah, that's a couple of work. What's changed for me over the years is kind of like maybe what success means. It used to like it still does to a certain degree. I always feel like I need to catch up and like get to the big name clients and get paid well, of course. But like having that big logo wall is kind of like a byproduct. For me now, I'm very happy to just continue working. I genuinely love what I do, but I also love doing that, and realize that like I also love living my life beyond it right now. Because what I love about work is essentially like getting like a gnarly big challenges that keep me raising my game, and also figuring out getting a front row seat to new and interesting challenges and projects, but also having time to make things that aren't work now, because I've started feeling like very much fulfilled when I'm not working. I'm a person who loves a hobby, and so I've taken up a couple of the year that I'm also like trying to bring back more alongside that don't really have a place in the commercial website, because like yeah, while I love doing what I do, I don't want just work to be my life's work. I want to continue doing what I love. And so part of that means updating, because again, I didn't have a portfolio until we came into the US. My next big jump in the work life will be releasing a massive portfolio update, alongside which I did last time, releasing fun t-shirts that I give away to family and friends, which I acknowledge I owe you one that I have not forgotten. I just need to reprint some of them, because originally I just wanted to make one in each size, but so many people, I was genuinely astounded that so many people wanted one. So I just made one for everybody that wanted one at the time, very limited edition, and then sent them out. And some people still haven't gotten them because I didn't manage to mail them out, or we haven't linked up again. But yeah, that's one of them. I did my Instagram filters here. It is in motion. I was trying to find them again because I want to revive them and figure out, because Facebook shuttered down the studio tool in which you can release them. I also am after thinking that I wasn't good at any sports and blowing out my knee, I eventually drifted to cycling. And nowadays I try to make basically what amounts to skate videos, but for cycling. And so when I go on longer trips, I cut down these trips and make like fun graphics for myself. It's like music. I also like work on with magazines sometimes, like doing little pieces of writing for fun, and or interviews with other creatives, which I still love doing these interviews. I did one with Pablo Rochat last year. There's one that still needs to come out sometime soon for the magazine Backstage Talks, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, I also love making hot sauce. I want to make that again, big time hobby cook. And I realized again, I'm gearing up for a project for amateur furniture making, because which cool creative doesn't love Donald Judd inspired furniture? I have this built this in my old office, and I want to build more benches and shelves, because a bench is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work, because people can sit on it. And I love cooking. That's something I want to devote more time to. It's been a busy year, but I'm gearing up for a couple projects. I'm very proud that in my online persona, a lot of people know me only from one time in COVID, having posted an elaborate Instagram story of how to make lasagna, which is still up there. And every once in a while, I think like once or twice a year, I drop like a far too long post that embarrasses my brother. He has teenage kids. Far too long stories about how to create a dish that embarrasses the teenagers but brings me great joy in sharing that knowledge. Also, something I want to bring back, because I noticed I saw on LinkedIn you started having these roast dinners to put together friends. Before I moved, I had a series over, I think like 6 years I managed, where I wanted to cook a turkey, and because Austria not only does it not have an ocean, but it also doesn't have Native Americans. So we don't have a Thanksgiving, but I decided I wanted to make like this giant turkey and all the sides. So I started calling for Thanksgiving to celebrate Tom Hanks. I put together these invites. In COVID, I even put together like a menu so people could order delivery, and then delivered it at a distance, of course. And what you see below is like from that year where we all had to be distant during COVID. I made these life-size Tom Hanks face, napkins, and then put together everybody that couldn't be at the same table. And to the top right is kind of like the last Thanksgiving I hosted when I was in Austria. That's me, still with the long hair, looking like Jesus in front of my happy crowd. And yeah, I've also lately started because music is a big part of my life, but I'm not very talented, but I enjoy making noise for myself. So I started recently getting back into making playlists, making music myself, and releasing some more of that. So I'm trying to build that creative practice by doing things. That's why that's up here. One of my favorite covers of all time. It's just incredible what one can do with Photoshop. I also wanted to make like a little personal moment, because don't worry, I'm getting to the end soon, James. No, if anybody is made to this far, you're getting like a juicy piece of intel that I wanted to save, because I read recently that autobiography, and I was talking about myself, is only to be trusted when it reveals something disgraceful. A man who gives a good account of himself is probably lying, since any life, when viewed from the inside, is simply a series of defeats. By George Orwell, and I thought that's very funny. And I wanted to touch upon like something that a lot of like these talks usually skip. And me not being a designer thought like maybe I'll break the mold and come up with some nasty or darker stuff too, because yeah, usually when one gives a talk, it's usually about like listing wins, and I just gave like close to 40 minutes of that, but the wins are only like the last 5% or like so little of the work. And to me, the successes that I've had almost didn't happen. And when they did, like it felt like they were coming after a long time of nobody watching and nobody caring. In that way, I feel like I'm very much like Pedro Pascal. You might see my name pop up now on Talking Thursdays, or see a project that I'm attached to, but I've been grinding away at this for years. It's just that nobody knew or cared because the work wasn't in English for a long time. The honest version of that is also like I was a straight A student. I put a lot of pressure on myself and trying to get all these good grades because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life or had a job path. And I remember this vividly. The head teacher we had took me aside one time and told me that I was depressed, and she wanted me to talk to my parents and start seeing a psychiatrist. She has a recommendation because she noticed like the early onset tendencies of depression on me. And that's how I ended up starting to go to therapy. The first time I took medication, and these things are often like not talked about, but I wanted to bring that up myself because like we can now joke about it. I'm very good at depression. I am very good at talking about it and having fun. For me, it was always a win when I made my therapist laugh, and she said a couple times I phrased things that she's never heard anyone say about depression, where I was like, I'm winning at this. Do I get a free hour? No, I don't. But I wanted to bring this up because like a lot of times like we just see things that people create, and for me it was really hard for a long time to really uncouple that, because the trigger for me in depression is like this downward spiral where I overthink things about myself, which is why I want to treasure more of like the side projects going forward, or like just having fun with things that are non-commercial and like don't need a client's or anybody else's approval and that just exist. Because for me, when the overthinking gift that I got turned inwards, it was very hard for me on occasion. There were several bouts of just being full on clinical depression, of not wanting to leave the house, crying all the time in my room, not going outside, and kind of like experiencing raw dogging the meaninglessness of life itself until you give it meaning. And also because like for a lot of time, or for a long time, I really thought that maybe I'll never truly be good at anything, and depression usually makes that certainly feel like a fact. I'm the Teflon Don, like Rick Ross, because any successes that I had always bounced off of me like a water on hot stone. It didn't sink in. I learned that's how serotonin works, and medication is also kind of like part of that, getting to that journey, because I really held myself back a long time for like depression. But the strange useful thing that I wanted to say is kind of like I learned over time, the one place that doubt couldn't follow me was work, because I just kept grinding away and putting the hours in, and I wasn't good at any sports. I wasn't good at skateboarding, but I locked myself into a freelance career because I liked what I was doing, but also because I had to make a living. And then just from doing a thing over and over, eventually getting good, I tried to take more pride in that and more value, because getting good is kind of like the one thing, but you still got to enjoy your life. So I was also trying to still keep up appearances and have fun, and make people happy and make money while you're like in the dumps is kind of a hard task. So this is how I got like super productive in depression mode. I started reading all the textbooks, being a huge nerd, and just getting into these psychology books to try to figure out how to beat this thing and like how to make it work. and put myself on a path for like grinding away and fixing myself and fixing things. And yeah, made a lot of head starts where I now feel like through also like the things I do outside of work that give me just like random joy and meaning, I get to be like focused and flourishing and in my own lane, because I also embraced like all the idiosyncrasies, all the weirdness that I have, where I didn't feel like work-wise I fit on any, or was sitting between the chairs, didn't maybe neatly fit into a category, or also because I couldn't find a proper full-time job at first that anybody wanted you. And yeah, to me, it ended up like being in thinking about this, still feeling hopeful, and like really, it sounds corny, but there's a line that I thought about a lot in putting together talk. You can live your life as the result of everything that came before, kind of like the history, setbacks, and the wiring you were handed for your brain, or you can live it at the cause of what comes next, and you get to choose kind of like which end of that you're holding. And that was a huge piece of me too, where I didn't want to be bogged down for like the time that I've lost to overthinking myself in deep depression, but really like the keeping to that joy of like these side projects and doing things without approval and not needing to be the best at the world. That's something that's not my job. And that those things took me embarrassingly long to figure out, but it's something that kind of like really like holds up, because yeah, being good at what you do for a living does not on its own make life rewarding. I do love what I do, but I also love having a life and figuring out things aside from that. So if you take one thing away from me as a person who moved all these 6 time zones with no network, and the no belief at first that he could pull it off. You don't even have to believe in yourself at first to begin with, because I did not think that I was actually gonna figure out how to even get to New York. It felt dicey to me for a long time. Something I even brought up in therapy. My therapist said that I'm prone to get over anxiety quickly, and I like walking very fast, and get very neurotic about things that annoy me about people, or like certain values and principles. And she said that I will fit right in there, and those things kind of give you hope. But yeah, what I think like is really just, it's not you have to want it even, but like if you look at your life truthfully, you will find these things that you're actually good at. So I wanted to end this quickly on like the things that I learned, a little quick round of takeaways, putting it together, so you don't have to ask me for the students of what I would want them to take away from the talk. I believe that hustle beats talent. I don't think I was ever naturally gifted to be a writer. I wasn't good at skating or good at sports. I didn't go to ed school and all that, but I refused to stop trying to be good at the one thing that I thought I could be good at. And I don't think I'm the most talented person, but I have a great work ethic, and I know that I can outwork and outstay everyone. And that will also lead you to interesting places once you combine like the talent, or see that for yourself, with some of that work ethic. I think this will hold true not just for anybody writing, but also for the designers. You can't invent something and judge it for yourself at the same time and in the same breath. Good things only come up once you've cleared junk out of the way. So I always start everything with a document and write out all the bad ideas, the shitty puns and dumb ideas, and then later on you look at it again, and you will find something worthwhile in your notes to take away. I think it's important, because I was uncomfortable for a long part of my life, to like, now I love a challenge. I think it's important to make yourself uncomfortable, whether that's looking at art or going on a walk, even things that don't make sense yet. Try to figure out something that you don't understand, and try to understand it, because that's a place where you'll actually grow. Distrust the obvious. If an answer for anything is apparent to everyone, it's probably just familiar, and familiar is rarely the right answer for everything. So for anything creative, like the most interesting part is usually something that nobody's noticing yet or picking up yet. Nothing is given. I would say that like you in life, you kind of like gotta keep going. I've learned that too in my time like coming to New York. No one owes you a thing. There are no shortcuts, and like the only thing that reliably works for anything is showing up again and again and again and again. And most of what now looks like a career from the outside in my own life is just persistence and just having no other way but to keep going. I also want to say that empathy is everything, something I saw like from journalism on in the interviews, which end up like just being conversations most of the times. I think for creative work to really be good, we have to ask questions, but actually also listen to the answer, because a lot of people think they ask questions, but they don't like pay attention to the answer. I think like the best creative work is not for the client, it's for the client's audience and people down below, because nobody's a consumer, everybody is a human and everybody's a customer. So if we're trying to create anything creative, I believe like the most interesting parts are working to understand other people and seeing the world from a perspective that's not your own. And yeah, sweat every detail, try to make things as good as you can, but also fuck any sense of perfection. You can only do as good a job as you believe, and you will know when you've put enough care into it. And if you feel like you didn't, maybe you didn't, and then add more care to it and try to be happy with the work. I will also say that making things is really important. Do that side project, that dumb thing that you just want to put out there. It's giving me a lot of joy to just releasing things and being less encumbered. Also helping like with the more downplaying and undervaluing myself of just putting myself out there with dumb things that only I think is fun. In that way, you really got to embrace joy, but it also applies to work, because I think like there's so many good ideas or good designs that just end up in a deck and kind of stay dead. And I think it's really important that we actually get to work on things that are realistic and that make it out of the deck. Yeah, care as much as needed, which I will say, because you will also run into jobs where people don't want you to care that much. They just want something done. So try to do your best. It's not your fault if it still turns out bad. All you can do is care as much as somebody asks you to. And especially when you're younger, say what you think, because in trying to do your best work, you should put forth any ideas you might have, even if they're bizarre to others. You can only make your I still do that with clients. You make the best case for an idea or where you think something is go, but you can't control the outcome. Like if somebody says no to something, we got to accept that. But sadly, you can't sometimes force people to accept good ideas. But when you listen to their critique or any complaints or considerations, it might help you make the idea even better. And something that still holds true, I think there's so much knowledge, and reading books are so inexpensive, and it's so important that people should read more and quietly rebuild the attention span in this era where everything keeps trying to steal your attention. And attention still is currency. So I would say guard your own to earn other people's attention. And yeah, play the long game, because in this world, everybody also wants everything instant. We've been trained on it, but good things really take time, and everything good that has happened, all the projects too, good things rarely happen on a schedule, least of all mine, but it will happen, and it will happen when you're just around to keep working on it. And if you don't feel like there's not a right fit or like a right job or position for you, I didn't neatly slot into a role for a long time, and I thought that was a kind of problem. But for me, if I couldn't find the lane, so I just ended up by accident making my own lane, forging my own road. And plenty of people will question and doubt you, but right up until your own lane fits you so well, people will assume it was always there for you. And yeah, what you give out lasts what you take. Be generous with your own work, be generous with your thoughts, but most of all in your private life, I think it's so important to give back to people that you love. Like the benches you saw were all given away to people. I love giving away some of my cooking, and I think people will remember you not for the just amazing work you created, but really how you made them feel as people. And I love this quote. I bring this up in strategy and creative projects all the time when discussing simplicity versus complexity of anything. This is from Einstein, who knew a thing or two about complicated things. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And I think that applies also to our own ideas as creatives, but also so much of work where really you want people to pay attention to something. You got to explain it to in a way that will make them care. So yeah, that's kind of my life principle and how I ended up here. I'm just always trying to be useful. I learned everything I know and do everything that I do, even the things that I had no idea how to do, really by trying to be useful in my life. And over time, you get better at it. You not only get to be useful in what you do, you also get to be useful with what you do, and also figuring out why you do it along the way. And yeah, I will go out saying if you can make it in Bamberg, Austria, you can make it anywhere. But yeah, thank you for having me. It's really like the thinking behind the work is often difficult to put into, or like summarizing your life's journey and trying to make sense of it for a talk is a difficult process. But thank you for letting me be here and speak to you, because I think like I started realizing like how much of the thinking that shaped me along the way still shows up in things that I do or like has affected me.
Humor is such a key kind of like tenet of you as a human being. How do you ensure that that doesn't always try to dominate your commercial work? Or is it that's the attribute they get with you, therefore that's the thing that they should try to kind of like take away from the work that you do?
I think that's an excellent question, because I think that's bothered me, like especially like when I started my career, it bothered me. Like the funny things usually came easy to me, probably by way of like being depressed and being a former like fat and short kid. You have to build up like a personality and humor to not be picked at. If you say the funny thing first, then nobody else can ridicule you for it, and that's how you become self-deprecating and eventually funny. And the thing is, like, I realized that like humor came easy to me, but I didn't want to be reduced to that. When I was trying to figure out like different tones of voice and working on different brands, there's not a lot of brands that will actually do fun, right, or humor, because it's
Yeah.
kind of tricky as a brand, and it always like it easily comes away as hokey. So I figured that like if it's just like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or funny, I would limit myself, and I would not be able to be like versatile and flexible. That's why I like gravitated more like towards the strategy thing side and kind of just parking. And that's what I also meant like when I say write and edit later, I usually get all these bad ideas or like any puns. I have so many ideas for horrible puns. I write
Yeah.
those things out first, get them out of the way, and don't think of them again. So they're like, I know of them, they're done. I will never speak of them again. And I'm actually like mostly working on not making brands funny, because I think that's more, and it's an easy takeaway, because then it becomes like more of a challenge and a skill where you want to find like what makes the individual brand voice sensible and really work for that company. And it's very rarely humor, because it's also so person specific and dependent of, with humor especially, like kind of like what people find funny, who it's from, and what the voice is. So I found it like much easier that like as a person, I like to think I'm funny enough or like unserious at it, but I'm very serious when it comes to work and like figuring all that out. And I almost like I think it's surprising sometimes to people like when you see the work
Yeah.
and how I am in person. But I don't believe you have to be serious as a person all the time, even if you do serious work, because there's like respect for the work. I will also say like in presentations, for example, very sensible, and I kind of save the jokes for last, or I might throw one in along the lines, but I'm not running a comedy show here. You still want to be taken seriously and show
Well,
like a client you respect the idea and the project.
people are looking about creating a portfolio or being able to think about how they position themselves, how much
Yeah,
is it
sure.
about understanding the person behind it and being able to have a very specific way of writing versus versatility of how you write? That's a very big question, by the way, and probably
Yeah.
what I've prepared you with beforehand.
Yeah, like me rambling on for the whole talk. So I get where
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
coming from, like trying to like put a bunch of things together. I understand. I think I understand the question now. So for me, I think like if you're trying to think of this as building it or building it out, I think it's more important to show like breadth and depth of thinking
Yeah.
of different things that you can do versus and representing that. But it's also like, for example, like a lot of classical or like copywriters that work in advertising, a lot of the portfolios are also like very self-deprecating and like humorous. But that's also like the nature of ad work is usually like largely leans on the more humorous side. I think if you're like trying to build this portfolio, it becomes about like the challenges that you seek, or like the projects that you're also proud of showing that side. Because I can imagine there's a lot of people like, it's also no knock. Like if I would get away, or if I would, it's by necessity too. Like if I would just get work for being funny all the time, maybe I would have stuck to it. But I figured like myself, like I want to be able to do all these other things that aren't inherently funny, and like I would love to work for a fashion company and like do all these other things, which is why, like, for example, the poetry thing, where I was just like, hey, somebody should put poetry there. And it was like, well, who's going to do it? And it was like, can you do that? And I was like, not really. And it was like, you should do it because we don't really have the budget for that. And you said we should have poetry there. So you figure it out. So a lot of these things just come out of necessity and like intentionally, but also trying to flex and like being willing to figure that out for yourself, of like of wanting to do a tone. Because I always like, despite downplaying myself, I always was interested in these challenging things where I was like, oh shit, I have no idea how to do that and what to do. And then I get really energized and inspired and desperate to try to figure this out and kind of crack this challenge. And I can only imagine there's a lot of people. And speaking specifically for like when you're trying to set out intentionally to do this, my friend Tobias von Schneider once said that like a portfolio that you build is really not about the work that you did, but about the work you want to do going forward. And that's how I really approached this, because I was really coming at it from like, I don't want to be just funny, because I'm not here to just be a stand-up comedian. I've tried. I've had a couple sets at open mic nights, but it's a different thing. And I think like when I put together my website, it was also not to get the plug. There's no discount to be had on my own website, but I was also trying to figure out, it was like a challenge itself. When I was writing the about copy, I was also like, well, what do I say? Like, which tone of voice do I use to best represent kind of like the way I am and how I think? So I ended up thinking like, I had different drafts and experiments, and I was like, you know what, I've never seen, like, have multiple tones of voice to get people to kind of like choose their own adventure and figure out the vibe that they're going for, or like that interests them the most, to learn something about me. And I thought it was like a fun flex in that. But that's how the thing came about, like kind of like trying things and then also figuring out what the situation needs. That's also where the strategy brain comes in, where sometimes I would work on just copy still, but then I always have so many questions that I'm not doing like creative strategy of really figuring out what the tone of voice should be. But if I'm doing strategy myself, I get to define these parameters. And a lot of times I really just lean into what I think is right for the company based on the strategy and like everything we've discussed. Because even if I'm funny, you always wanted to serve the brand, the project, the idea, and the people behind it. And like you have someone who has a great idea, a great project, and it's like the people aren't funny. Even if I have the greatest, funniest lines of all time, it wouldn't really help or do them any good if I made that kind of like the point of their tone of voice. If they couldn't carry it forward.
Well,
like,
I was going to say this is a very, very good point, because all the questions I'm going to ask you could probably lead to another half an hour per question. So how do you, as a copy director, you had so many titles, I'm trying to work out and remember exactly which one I should use. There was lots of titles that you used throughout.
It's like Thomas, Tommy, Tom.
Yes. Okay. So Popcorn. How, when you are a linguist, right? When you have a really strong ability to grasp and to find the correct words to articulate yourself, when you're going through a commercial process of applying and crafting a tone of voice, what is the most effective way you've ever found to be able to ensure a client can adopt that voice correctly, so it doesn't end up being something that is really beautiful to read in a document, beautiful in a agency case study, but is still able to be directed by that client? What do you think the key to the success of that is?
James, you've hit upon one of my favorite things. That's why I also had like the make the thing, because I always believe like the best ideas when you're putting together a brand, there's so many cool things that are always in the deck, and then you see the brand like on the road and it's halfway there, or like it feels inauthentic. But there's no surefire way to process to ensure this. What I like to do is like, coming from the interviews, is like through that, defining the tone of voice by already trying to, I usually say it's a partway a therapy session for the client, where they first tell you about all their wants and needs and problems and challenges. And then it's translation first to them, where you're presenting like your ideas and your strategy, your design, your copywriting to them. But then it's also translation to the audience. And through these sessions together of like really presenting options, I try now, I've learned this over the years, like before I just try, it's like shooting darts in the dark, where you try to like find good lines and the client likes some of them. Now I try to bring the client on as soon as possible, kind of like making it part of the strategy, or when you're discussing ideas already, to really be like, I lowball and call them verbal moods, where I'm just like, I wrote a bunch of lines already, like what do you gravitate towards, like which resonates with you, which feels true. And then you just, without like needing to feel like the authorship or needing to feel bad because it doesn't land, I like hearing in the moment in a work session from a client, like, this feels really true, like that I wouldn't say that. And I was like, why? And then you just go into the specifics of like, why does it feel off to you? And so it's like very much like the Rorschach test exercise to get them to react in voiceover. And nowadays I like to build the tone of voice from that, where like you have a good discussion, you get a sense of like what they can authentically represent, what really resonates with them. Also, like on a tactical level, agency or like studio to studio, it gives the client like a lot of buy-in early on, because even for some ideas, even before you have to start designing things, the client gets to be part of the creative process, really has it collaborative, and then also feels some ownership over some ideas. I've had like verbal drafts and the client would be like, I wouldn't say that. And I was like, here's why I think it's a good idea. And then they're like, if we changed it to this, like it would be better. And then you make like a small tweak that the client feels great about. And they're like, that makes it better, because now, not that it's like a better line maybe necessarily, but it also feels more authentic to the people that have to represent these ideas. So it's a lot of it about like just trying to uncover what the people, what a client already wants to do and has inside of them, kind of.
Your opinion, and your opinion only, what tenets do you think make up a really distinct and great tone of voice? So what do you think needs to make up, what needs to exist within a tone of voice for it to feel strong? That's one question. And what's your opinion now that there's so much kind of proliferation of LLMs and kind of like AI-based tools? What is your opinion when people say to you, please develop a tone of voice that is now going to train our AI or Claude systems? Have you been approached by that challenge?
I'm down for both of those questions. So I actually am working on a project right now that I can't divulge too much about, where I'm essentially like tasked with trying to train systems to get brand voice, right? And it's a fascinating, very sticky challenge. And the thing that I believe always need to be in a good tone of voice is, a good tone of voice doesn't apply to just the writing or like the messaging. A good tone of voice just represents the brand overall, like the brand personality and how it feels. And that can be various ways. Like I usually try to strive for a tone of voice that, if you read it, feels true for the whole brand, not just for the writing, but really lays down a brand personality. And I anchor it in like 3 principles that also, like, sometimes it's singular adjective, sometimes it's like the adverb adjective, sometimes it's like personality traits. And then you describe kind of like these different facets that you picked up on, like through all the conversation and the exercises you've had with the client. And there's a lot of discussion in the tone of voice scene. And like for copywriters, if for example, if we are not this, things are useless. But I think like any device or tone of voice thing, they're also, for me, like every time I do one of them or write them up, they're always completely different, because the things that I've learned about the client or that I think will make them work are so vastly different. What I find really works when we're talking about just writing is giving lots of examples of not just having the principles of we are both human different, but really like, how does that show up as a tone of voice? How does it show up as writing? And really educating the client for that, because then they also see the values. And when you're putting together these examples, not going for like obviously bad examples, but really like making a line that is almost there and really, really good, but it's just not the tone of voice that you could and should take, because it's not specific. And then also like succinctly but still explicitly explaining why that is like a bad line based on the things you've outlined for the tone of voice and for guidelines. So I would say, like, to sum it up, it's usually like a matter of writing a tone of voice, but also getting really specific for messaging principles, kind of like, so what does this really mean in action? Like, when we say we want to be energizing, inspiring, you got to give people an idea of not just example lines of how to write for that, but also why do these lines work. And then it's good if you've defined them with the client, because then you can point to them and be like, here's why you think it works, because it represents this from your tone of voice, and you can authentically lean into that as part of your voice. I usually also try to say, like, to clients too, my hope and my goal for every tone of voice is too that it's not just like I get to deliver a beautiful bow on a couple cool lines and put that together with the strategy as part of some brand guidelines. I want it to be so not prescriptive but inspiring. I want somebody who doesn't think of themselves as a writer like me. I want them to be in the same situation where they're picking this up and they're not like, oh, okay, we don't use exclamation marks, here's our emoji use. I want it to be like, oh, like, I can speak to what we do and I feel empowered to say something about what we do in something that is like on brand voice and brand tone and represents that, but also in my own way. And I think that's really the key in making as many people within the company feel inspired and empowered to use the brand voice, because it's also not a singular thing. Like, these things are slightly malleable. It's not an exact science. It's like humor, even if you have different tone of voice principles. These things mean everything to everyone, but like, if you have these inspiring principles, it might unlock something in somebody, whether, like in the client sessions, they're like, this gives me an idea for how to describe my specific situation or idea, and keep it brand voice and make it like an exciting statement. So in best tone of voices, I think like the goal is really to put together something that feels inspiring and set to beat that horse of my talk, but like as useful as possible to as many people.
It's you just wanted to say, one, thank you for being vulnerable. I think it's extremely brave to do that. I think a lot of people should get to a point where they can feel comfortable in a place to be able to express how they feel without judgment. So I think that's an extremely important thing that I don't think anyone else has done on Talking Thursdays. I think also on top of that, it's just a celebration of you. You do great work. I'm grateful for the relationship that we have, and I know that we'll continue to be friends for, well, unless you don't send me the T-shirt, then maybe we won't be friends anymore. But aside from
it's
that,
coming. I'll also put you on the list for the next round. Once I update the portfolio, I'm working on the next drop already, and I'm so excited. That's what I want to update the portfolio soon. No, well, genuinely, thank you for having me. I wanted to say too, on the other side, I'm genuinely not trying to blow smoke up your nose, because now I'm already here on the talk. Like, I don't need to brown nose you. I've been a fan of Times Elliott for such a long time, and you did accept such great work, and it was like, I would have never dared to approach you in my pre-New York Times or like try to talk to you. I've just lost all shame and all discomfort of talking to people by way of having to reach out to make those connections. And I've also gotten, like, over the years, so happy to speak to people and give their flowers. And when I met you, it was really like so beautiful and fun to just meet somebody who you barely knew but really connect so fast. And I was so surprised by your presence too, because you're such a thoughtful and sweet and kind and funny person. And I think your work, like, on the same side also feels like very serious a lot of times, and like very considered and meticulous. So I was also, like, at first so surprised by how warm and sweet you are, because the work looks so cool. And
I'd like to think I'm cool. My wife thinks I'm cool, and my 9-year-old nephew thinks I'm cool. But yeah, look, it was very easy for us to connect, and I was grateful to meet Christina whilst I was there, who's also been on the episodes. And again, it was just really natural to be able to kind of like spend that time with you guys. I think that, without getting into too much mush, because we're 2 hours in, and I don't know if people have lasted this long, but I just want to say a massive thank you.
The YouTube drop-off is a steep cliff.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the first 15 minutes they peak, but if they've made it all the way here, you get a free copywriting course from Thomas.
Or a t-shirt.
Oh yeah, or
I'll give the
I'm not
t-shirt.
Yeah, maybe the t-shirt. The first person to give the comment saying popcorn gets a free t-shirt. How about that? Let's see if they've made it all the way through to the end. But yeah, massively grateful. I really hope there's people who do make their way through, not just the talk, but the conversation that we had at the end. And very much look forward to seeing you at some point, either in Europe or New York, potentially in September when I'm out there.
Ooh, yeah. And if I'm stuck around here for longer, I'll definitely want to go along. It's been a while since I've been to London.
Take it easy,
All
my
right.
friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
See you
Talk soon.
soon. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.